The rain had been falling steadily since sunset, turning the quiet suburban neighborhood into a maze of glistening streets and shimmering porch lights. Most families had already gone inside, enjoying warm dinners while the storm grew heavier outside. Ethan Carter, a quiet single father and former Navy SEAL, had just finished putting his 7-year-old daughter Lily to bed. Since losing his wife 4 years earlier, Ethan had lived a simple life in the small house next door, working long hours as a maintenance supervisor and spending every free moment raising Lily. The neighbors knew him as the polite man who always waved, helped shovel snow, fixed broken fences without asking for payment, and never talked much about himself. Few people knew anything about his military past, and Ethan preferred it that way. That evening, as he prepared to leave for the night shift at work, a sudden knock echoed through his front door. Curious, he opened it to find a frightened young woman standing on his rain-soaked porch. She wore a beige trench coat over a white sweater and matching white pants, her long brown hair damp from the storm. Her breathing was uneven, and worry filled her eyes. "I'm so sorry to bother you," she said softly. "My car broke down 3 streets away, my phone battery is dead, and every taxi I called canceled because of the weather. Could you please give me a ride?" Ethan looked past her toward the empty street where the rain continued to pour. He didn't hesitate. "Of course," he replied kindly. "Just give me 1 minute to check on my daughter, and we'll leave." The woman smiled with visible relief, unaware that the quiet single father standing before her was about to become the most important person she would ever meet, and Ethan had no idea that offering one simple ride would change both of their lives forever. A few minutes later, Ethan quietly checked on Lily one last time, gently pulled the blanket over her shoulders, and left a note on the kitchen counter for his elderly neighbor, Mrs. Wilson, who often kept an eye on Lily whenever he worked late. Grabbing his truck keys, he walked back to the porch where the young woman still stood shivering in the cold rain. "Ready?" he asked with a reassuring smile. She nodded gratefully, and together they hurried to Ethan's old pickup truck parked in the driveway. As they drove through the rain-soaked streets, silence filled the cab for a few minutes before Ethan spoke. "I'm Ethan," the woman smiled faintly. "Claire." She thanked him again for stopping to help, admitting that several drivers had ignored her because of the storm. Ethan simply shrugged. "My father always taught me that if someone needs help and you can help, you do it." Claire looked at him curiously. There was something unusually calm about him. He didn't ask personal questions, didn't try to impress her, and didn't even seem interested in who she was. Instead, he kept his attention on the slippery road while making sure she felt safe. When they reached downtown, Claire hesitated before giving him the address. It wasn't a hotel or apartment building. It was one of the city's tallest corporate headquarters. Ethan parked beneath the illuminated entrance and glanced at the massive glass building. Before he could ask anything, several black luxury SUVs suddenly pulled up. Security officers rushed toward Claire with worried expressions. "Ma'am, we've been looking everywhere," one of them exclaimed. Ethan looked at Claire in surprise as she stepped out of the truck. She turned back with an apologetic smile. "I guess I forgot to tell you who I am." One of the security officers, respectfully, opened an umbrella over her. "Miss Claire Lawson, the board has been waiting for you." Ethan blinked in disbelief. The frightened woman he had just given a ride to wasn't an ordinary traveler at all. She was the billionaire, CEO of Lawson International. Claire looked back at Ethan with genuine gratitude and said softly, "Thank you for treating me like a person, not like a billionaire. I don't think I'll ever forget tonight." Before Ethan could respond, the security team escorted her inside the towering building, leaving him sitting quietly in his old pickup truck, completely unaware that this unexpected meeting was only the beginning of a remarkable story. The next morning, Ethan assumed the previous night's encounter was over and returned to his normal routine. He prepared breakfast for Lily, walked her to the school bus, and headed to work, never expecting to see Claire again. Meanwhile, inside the glass headquarters of Lawson International, Claire couldn't stop thinking about the quiet man who had helped her without asking for anything in return. Her executives spent the morning discussing billion-dollar investments, but her mind kept returning to Ethan's simple words. If someone needs help and you can help, you do it. By lunchtime, she asked her assistant to quietly locate the man who had driven her home during the storm. Within hours, the security team identified Ethan Carter, a widowed single father, former Navy SEAL respected by every neighbor, living a modest life only a few miles away. Claire smiled as she read the report. "He never once asked who I was," she whispered. Not even after seeing the building. That afternoon, a black luxury SUV quietly stopped outside Ethan's small house. Neighbors peeked through their windows in surprise as Claire stepped out, dressed simply in a cream-colored coat instead of her usual business attire. Ethan had just returned from work and looked genuinely surprised to see her, standing on his porch. "Ms. Lawson?" he asked. Claire smiled warmly. "Please, call me Claire." She held out a small gift bag. "I came to thank you properly for last night." Ethan politely shook his head. "You didn't need to do that. Anyone would have given you a ride." Claire smiled softly. "No, they didn't. You were the only one who stopped." Before Ethan could reply, Lily ran out of the house and curiously looked at the elegant visitor. Claire knelt with a friendly smile and introduced herself. Within minutes, Lily was happily showing Claire the small vegetable garden she and her father had planted together. Watching them laugh, Claire realized something she hadn't experienced in years. Despite all her wealth, there was a warmth inside. Ethan's modest home that no luxury mansion had ever given her. As the evening sun began to set, Claire quietly looked at Ethan and said, "I think one simple ride may have changed more than just my night." Ethan smiled, unaware that this unexpected friendship was about to transform both of their lives forever. Over the next several weeks, Claire found herself visiting Ethan's neighborhood more often than her corporate office. Sometimes she brought books for Lily. Other times, she simply joined them for dinner on the small front porch, where laughter came more easily than it ever had inside the luxurious penthouse she called home. Her executives couldn't understand why their billionaire CEO seemed happier spending evenings in a modest suburban house than attending elite business parties. But Claire had discovered something money had never been able to buy: peace. Ethan never treated her like a billionaire. He simply treated her like Claire. For the first time in years, she felt valued for who she was instead of what she owned. One afternoon, breaking news spread across the city. Lawson International announced a major community initiative to support single parents, veterans, and children who had lost a parent. At the press conference, reporters expected Claire to speak about business strategy, but instead she smiled and shared a different story. "A few weeks ago," she said, "my car broke down during a storm. I knocked on a stranger's door asking for a ride. That stranger didn't know I was a CEO, and he didn't care. He simply chose kindness." Cameras flashed across the room as Claire continued. "That one act of kindness reminded me what true leadership looks like." The audience applauded while Ethan, watching the broadcast from home with Lily, quietly smiled. Later that evening, Claire returned to Ethan's house once again. This time she wasn't carrying business documents or gifts. She stood on the same porch where everything had begun and looked at Ethan with sincere gratitude. "That rainy night," she said softly, "I thought I was asking you for a ride. I never realized you were leading me toward a completely different life." Ethan smiled gently. "Sometimes the smallest decisions become the biggest turning points." Lily ran outside, holding 3 cups of hot chocolate, and handed one to Claire. The 3 of them sat together on the porch, watching the sunset replace the memory of that rainy night. As the warm evening breeze drifted through the quiet neighborhood, Claire realized that success wasn't measured by skyscrapers, private jets, or billions of dollars. It was measured by the people who stood beside you when you needed them most. And Ethan understood that the greatest mission of his life wasn't the one he completed as a Navy SEAL. It was building a safe, loving home where kindness could change lives. The single ride he offered a stranded stranger had become the beginning of a beautiful new chapter, proving that sometimes one simple act of compassion can change everything forever.